Last night we looked at the book as a whole, trying to start with the big picture and move down to see each of the segments in the book. We looked at chapters 1 to 5 as the introduction, the problem, how can this Israel ever become that Israel for the sake of the world? And I suggested that chapter 6, Isaiah's call, is in that place in the book for theological reasons, not chronological, to say if the nation could have the same experience of God that the man had, then the nation of unclean lips would be able to have clean lips through which to speak to the world. Then we looked at the first part of what I believe is the second main division. First division, the call to servanthood. The second main division, all of the rest of the first part of the book, chapters 7 to 39, what is the basis of servanthood? What must servanthood rest upon? And I argued that it rests upon trust in God, that we can indeed trust Him. We can indeed lay our lives down on Him and know that He will not drop us. We began to look at that at the first section, which I've entitled No Trust. Now, I mentioned in the course of the evening that there is this recurring contrast between judgment and hope. And you see that in chapters 7 to 12, where Ahaz refuses to trust God and as a result reaps judgment upon his nation through Assyria, whom he trusted, coming upon them. And yet, Isaiah is able to say that if at any time they would come to grips with who they are in the light of God, there's hope. The Messiah, He's going to come. So there it is that contrast that is continuing throughout the book. Tonight, then, we want to look at the first part of what I've called lessons in trust. Chapters 13 to 23, and then the second part, chapters 24 through 27, and finally, 28 through 33. So, 13 to 33 tonight. I said last night that how I see this section functioning is in response to Ahaz's failure. He was invited by Isaiah. Put your faith in Him, and He will deliver you from these neighboring nations to the north, Syria and Israel. He would not. He failed the test. So, back to work. And these chapters then, 13 all the way through 33, we'll be looking at that question. Can we trust? Should we trust? Should we trust in God instead of the nations? Why shouldn't we trust in the nations? So we have then lessons in trust. Back to the books. Is this a unit? And that's one of the tasks in inductive Bible study, is determine the limits of a unit. Why do I say that 13 to 35 is a unit? Well, first of all, I say it because of what I mentioned last night, inclusio. 7 to 12, no trust. 36 to 39, trust. And I'll give you a hint. I'll speak about it in the lectures next week. But do you remember I emphasized where Isaiah stood when he challenged Ahaz to trust? If you've got your Bible, look there with me. Chapter 7. Verse 3. The Lord told him where to go to make the invitation. The Lord said to Isaiah, "Go out, you and your son Shear-Yashub, only a remnant will return." That was interesting, wasn't it? Ahaz says, "Oh, Isaiah, it's so good to see you again. It's been so long. And who's this with you?" "Only a remnant will return." Oh. To meet Ahaz at the end of the aqueduct of the upper pool on the road to the launderer's field. That's where you're supposed to go. Now please turn over to chapter 36. What Isaiah predicted has come to pass. Every fortification in the land has been taken by the Assyrians, and the Assyrian third in command is sent to Jerusalem to demand Hezekiah's surrender. Verse 2. Then the king of Assyria sent his field commander with a large army from Lachish to King Hezekiah at Jerusalem. When the commander stopped at the aqueduct of the upper pool on the road to the launderer's field. It's the same place, isn't it? The very spot where Isaiah had stood some 35 years earlier. That's the spot on which the Assyrian arrogantly stands and says, "I dare you to trust." That's inclusio, folks. That's bookending. So we have every reason to believe that what comes between those bookends, 13 to 35, is indeed a unit. Also, because here in these chapters is the recurring reference to the nations. Over and over and over again, the nations are represented. So the question is, who are you going to trust? Are you going to trust Yahweh, the creator of all things, or are you going to trust humanity in the form of the nations? We see then in this larger unit some subunits. 13 to 23, the oracles against the nations, or in the chart that I showed you, judgment upon the nations. Here is continuity. That is, over and over and over again, a message of judgment upon a nation. That's continuity, the repetition of certain common ideas. Then comes chapters 24 to 27. In 13 to 23, the nations have been the prominent actors. And we might get the idea that God, Yahweh, is only a reactor. Chapters 24 to 27 make it crystal clear that is not the case. Yahweh is the great actor on the stage of history. He is the one who's calling the shots. He is the one who is going to be the judge of the nations. 13 to 23, the nations judged. 24 to 27, Yahweh the judge of the nations. Then chapters 28 to 33. This is characterized, well, I said this is continuation. We're going to see a development that moves through chapters 24 to 27 as the ideas lead onward and upward. In 28 to 33, we see repetition 5 times. Whoa. Probably the best translation of that in English is the archaic word alas. Alas. It's the word for a funeral. 5 times. And we'll see how those are applied. And then there again is continuation. There's movement from the beginning point to the ending point with a contrast in that. Finally, chapters 34 and 35, which we'll deal with in the 5th lecture. Conclusion. What do you get if you trust the nations? A desert. But when you have gotten a desert, if you will turn to God in trust, He will turn the desert into a garden. Marvelous contrast there between judgment and hope in conclusion to this segment. So tonight, 13 to 33, we're going to leave the conclusion for the moment and focus on the other aspects of the lessons in trust. So, these chapters conform somewhat to the chronology of the period. Not absolutely by any means, but broadly speaking. We move from 735 BC to 701. And these chapters reflect some of the things that were going on there. Isaiah's encounter with Ahaz by the aqueduct of the upper pool was about 735. We say that because he predicted the destruction of Damascus, and that occurred in 732. And he said it's going to occur before the child will say Mama and Papa. 3 years? Maybe, somewhere in there. But Damascus fell. Assyria had been dormant for some 60 years. The result of Jonah's ministry, I believe. But now they're not dormant anymore. And they're on their way toward that ultimate destination, Egypt. And in the way are Israel and Judah. Samaria fell in 722. The last Philistine cities fell in 720 to 710. And so Judah stands alone. What are we going to do? A great temptation to make a deal with Egypt. And of course, Egypt understands as well. We've got no one between us except Judah. So somehow we've got to bolster them. Somehow we've got to get involved in an alliance with them so that at least it'll slow down the monster. The final showdown comes in 701. Sennacherib is the Assyrian emperor now. And he knows that he cannot leave Judah in his rear while he's attacking Egypt. He's got to take Judah out, small and insignificant as it is. He can't leave it. He's got to take it. That's what's going on in the time period when these chapters are being written. So he says, Isaiah, don't trust the nations. Now, why are these oracles here in this book? Again, this is part of understanding how the book is fitting together. In Ezekiel, there are oracles against the nations, and those appear in the middle of his book. He says Jerusalem is going to fall. He is one of the hostages taken to Babylon when Jehoiakim surrendered in 598. But the people back in Jerusalem are saying, oh, those people taken as hostages, they were bad figs. The good figs here in Jerusalem are going to be fine. Ezekiel's message is, no, Jerusalem is going to fall. It took 12 years, but it happened. The oracles against the nations are in the middle between that one and Jerusalem is going to be rebuilt. I think often that Ezekiel's ministry was like Moses' ministry. 40 years of people saying, no. Jerusalem is going to be destroyed? Never. Jerusalem has fallen. It's all over. Jerusalem is going to be rebuilt? Not a chance. So there stand the oracles against the nations neatly between those two sections. In Jeremiah, the oracles against the nations are at the end of his book. So what are these oracles against the nations doing here? Many commentators will say, well, it's an accident. To which I say reverently, hogwash. No, they're here on purpose. Ahaz trusted the nations. God says, don't do it. So they stand here very neatly. All these nations are under judgment from your God. And many of them will one day serve him. Why would you trust them? Altogether, they amount to nothing. The glory of Babylon ends up in the grave. The political scheming of Assyria, Philistia, Moab, Syria, Israel, they're all going to come to nothing. The resources of Egypt, the Nile, their religion. Egypt had the prize for the most gods until Hinduism came along. Their wisdom, the commerce of Arabia. There was a great trade route that ran across the middle of the Arabian desert from Babylon to Tema and on to Edom and on to Egypt. And we see the word coming across that trade route, Babylon has fallen. Babylon has fallen. Our business is over. And then, shockingly, Judah is under judgment. No, wait a minute. No. These are our enemies that are under judgment. No. You're just one of the nations. Your religion is worth no more than theirs. Wow. And finally, the wealth of Tyre. Babylon faced east, and all the riches of the east came to Babylon and through Babylon to the ancient Near East. Tyre faced west, and all the riches of the Mediterranean came through Tyre to the ancient Near East. When I teach this, I often ask students, figure out what is the sequence here. And they go crazy because it's tough to find a sequence except bookending. Babylon in the east, Tyre in the west. But there it is. What are they all worth? 0. Why would you trust them and not Yahweh? Let's look briefly, I hope, at some of these oracles. One of the big questions is, why do we begin with Babylon? Babylon is not the enemy in Isaiah's lifetime. Assyria is. Now, they are both part of the Mesopotamian Valley. Babylon down here, Assyria up here. But at this point in Isaiah's life, Babylon is a vassal of Assyria. Why don't we begin with, don't trust Assyria? That's what Ahaz did. Why begin with Babylon? Well, one suggestion is they were tempted to make a deal with Babylon against Assyria. That's what Hezekiah falls for in the end. So that's one possibility, that Isaiah is saying, don't do it, don't do it. Or possibly it's because Isaiah knows that Babylon is the ultimate threat for Judah. I want to suggest another possibility. And this is kind of American, so I hope you'll forgive me. But even though Babylon was under Assyria's thumb politically and militarily, Babylon was the center of sophistication and culture. It's a little like New York City and Washington, D.C. Where's the political power? Where's the military power? Oh, it's in Washington. But hey, if you're from New York, you know those people down there in the District of Columbia, they really don't have any culture. They don't really have any glory. I think that's what's going on here. He's speaking of Babylon symbolically. Babylon is the glory of the world. But Babylon, all the glory of the world, is going to be completely destroyed. I think this was utterly unbelievable to people to whom Isaiah spoke it or read it. Babylon? You won't even be able to find it? It will be a desert place, not inhabited or lived in through all generations, where no nomads will pitch their tents, no shepherds will rest their flocks. Oh, surely not. He was right, wasn't he? For centuries, we did not even know where Babylon had been. All the glory of humanity gone. And then we come to chapter 14. Now, John Milton took one stanza of this poem and said, this is talking about Satan. Well, in that, Satan is a creature of God, and in that, he has revolted through pride. Yes, it can apply, but I don't think he's talking about Satan here. It's a beautiful poem, one of the more beautiful ones in the book, and it is a lament. There's a special Hebrew meter that marks the lament. And there's language that marks the lament. So people are saying, the world is weeping because you have gone. The trees shed their leaves. What has happened? This turns it on its head. The trees are rejoicing because you're dead. Earth is glad because you're gone. The underworld is delighted to welcome you. People you've killed are there waiting for you. Heaven threw you out. You tried to sit on God's throne, and it wouldn't have it. And you are one corpse strewn among many on the battlefield. Pride, human pride. You're dead, and we're glad. The Emperor Sargon, who preceded Sennacherib, we believe, died on the battlefield. He ruled between 721 and 705, right in the middle of this event. There he is. So this section on Don't Trust the Nations begins with this picture. Here is all of human glory, and there it is, a corpse among other corpses on the battlefield. Don't trust Babylon. The very end of the chapter 14, he goes over to a few verses about Assyria, almost dismissive. And he says, don't you understand? God has had all this planned out for a long time. You think you're doing this on your own because you're so mighty and powerful? No. You're just fulfilling Yahweh's plan. Philistia, don't you know that God has established Zion and that one day you will be worshiping there? Moab, 2 chapters given to Moab, 15 and 16. And it's interesting that Isaiah several times says, oh, how we weep for Moab. Now, some commentators think that's sarcastic. I don't. Remember that Moab and Judah were often friendly with each other. Remember Ruth and Naomi? But the picture that he describes is proud Moab. They lived up in the hills, good defensive places. Proud Moab is being driven south around the end of the Dead Sea, and they are coming to Jerusalem to beg the Son of David to take them in. And the verse, very significant verse. Verse 3 of chapter 16. In love, a throne will be established. In faithfulness, a man will sit on it. One from the house of David, one who in judging seeks justice and speeds the cause of righteousness. There are about 6 words that define God's character in the Old Testament. 4 of them are there in that one verse. Moab, your only hope is to come to to Jerusalem's God. Then in chapters 17 and 18, Syria and Israel are depicted together. The opening announcement is, this is an oracle against Damascus. But you're only about 3 verses into chapter 17, and you're talking about Israel. So it's that deal that started Ahaz down his road to destruction, where Syria and Israel are united. And he says, the day will come when they will look to their Maker. They'll tear down their idol altars, and they'll come to him. Why would you trust them? Why would you fear them? They're in Yahweh's hands, and the day will come when they'll recognize it. And then comes the end of chapter 18, the end of chapter 17 and into chapter 18, sort of a stepping back and looking at the picture as a whole. If you've got your Bible there, look at chapter 17, verse 12. Woe to the many nations that rage. They rage like a raging sea. Woe to the peoples who roar. They roar like the roaring of great waters. Although the peoples roar like the roar of surging waters, when he rebukes them, they flee far away. Driven before the wind like chaff on the hills, like tumbleweed before a gale. In the evening, sudden terror. Before morning, they're gone. This is the portion of those who loot us, the lot of those who plunder us. And in the end, as we go on into chapter 18, the nations are going to bring gifts to Yahweh. Why would you trust them? They're all under judgment, and some of them are going to come in worship to your God. But then we come to that 21st chapter. I get this right. I skipped over Egypt for time's sake. Judah. Why would Judah be in this list? The first picture that emerges is the people are rejoicing. They're having a party. And the prophet says, "What in the world is the matter with you? What troubles you now that you've all gone up on the roofs? Your town so full of commotion, your city of tumult and revelry. Your slain were not killed by the sword, nor did they die in battle. All your leaders have fled together. They've been captured without using the bow." We don't know exactly what is being pictured here, but it looks as though when Hezekiah is threatened by Sennacherib, the first thing Hezekiah does is to get all the money he's got in the kingdom and send it to Sennacherib and ask him to go home. Well, he takes the money and stays in place. Then this field commander, the third in charge of the army, comes and demands that they surrender, but he gets a message that the Egyptian army has come out, and so he leaves. I think this is what's happening. Oh, wow. He was threatening us. We're the only place left standing, but we're standing. Party time. And Isaiah says, "You don't understand at all, do you? This is where eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die comes from." You're rejoicing. You're medicating yourself with alcohol when the end is staring you in the face. So Isaiah says, "Let me weep. Let me weep because I see what is happening. You're looking to your defenses. You're looking to the water system. But you are not looking to the one who made it or have regard for the one who planned it long ago. Got your eyes in the wrong places. You're looking to your defenses rather than the only one in the universe who can defend you." I think the message for us here is pretty glaring. Upon whom am I trusting? Upon whom are you trusting? My retirement funds? My job? My religion? Or Yahweh? One of the things that runs through the book of Isaiah is this critique of leadership. I'll say more about this in a moment, but when we won't trust God, we tend to invest our leaders with supposedly godlike characteristics. And they always fail us. They cannot do anything else. They're not God. And they do not have godlike powers. But somehow we expect them to save us. And here it is. The prime minister, the one who is, the technical term is, the one who's in charge of the household. And some people say it's the palace administrator. I don't think so. It's the prime minister. And Isaiah meets him as he's coming out of the city with a beautiful chariot and a matched team to look over the work on his tomb. And Isaiah goes out to meet him. say this, what are you doing here? And who gave you permission to cut out a grave for yourself here, hewing your grave on the height and chiseling your resting place in the rock? Beware, the Lord is about to take firm hold of you and hurl you away, you mighty man. The irony, the nation is being threatened with destruction. And here's the prime minister who's collecting money to build his tomb. And so Isaiah says, you're going to be taken out of your position, and a better man than you is going to be put in. He's going to be the peg on which the nation will hang its hopes. But that weight is going to be too much for him, and the peg will be broken off. Who do we trust? Who do we trust? So we conclude with the oracle against Tyre, the mighty nation, riches, the trading partner for Judah and the other nations there on the coast. And it's gone. Don't trust the nations. We turn then to Yahweh, the judge of the nations, chapters 24 to 27. Yahweh is the actor on the stage of history, not the nations. He's the one who determines earth's fate. Chapter 24 sums up virtually everything that has been said up to this point about the nations. See, the Lord is going to lay waste the earth and devastate it. He will ruin its face and scatter its inhabitants. And so the chapter goes on over and over again. The Lord, the earth. The Lord, the earth. But then, in chapter 25, he invites all nations to a great feast. Destruction, hope. Judgment, hope. God's intended last word is never destruction. His intended last word is hope. Chapter 26, Isaiah speaks for the nation, and he says, but we can't do it, God. We can't bring the nations to you. We can't bring deliverance to the world. You're going to have to do this. And I sort of see God saying, I wondered when you were going to get that point. We can't deliver the world, but you can. And then, remember the vineyard of bitter grapes, chapter 5? Now, in 27, sing about a fruitful vineyard. I, the Lord, watch over it. I water it continually. I guard it day and night so that no one may harm it. I'm not angry. If only there were briars and thorns confronting me, I would march against them in battle. I would set them all on fire. The vineyard of bitter grapes. The walls torn down, the animals called in. But that's not the end of the story with our God. There will come another day, a day when God will treasure his vineyard, and his vineyard will produce good fruit. I love that picture. I wish there were some briars and thorns around here that I could attack. And he says, you think you have suffered? Oh, your enemies are going to suffer much more than you have. So, in this section, we notice some recurrences. Remember, recurrence is repetition of ideas, thoughts, or repetition. Recurrence of the same words. Yahweh occurs 25 times in these 4 chapters. When you repeat yourself, you're trying to make a point. Have I said that before? When you repeat yourself, you're trying to make a point. I won't do it a third time. 6 times in chapter 24, 5 times in chapter 25. Yes, 10 in 26. The one about we can't deliver, but you can. 10 times. And 4 times in chapter 27. But there also is a repetition of songs and singing. 24:9, 24:16, 25:5, 26:1, 27:2, 5 times. Songs and singing. And city, 7 times. And the interesting thing is, there's a contrast. This is where I see this continuation thing. The songs of the ruthless, all that they have done as they have sung their triumphant songs over us. But there will come a day when the song of salvation we will sing. Same way with city. The city of earth, the city that has dominated us. Assyria, Nineveh, Ashur, Kala, the cities of the earth, Babylon. But there is coming the city of God. Verse 20, this is chapter 26, verse 1. In that day this song will be sung in the land of Judah. We have a strong city. God makes salvation its walls and ramparts. Open the gates that the righteous nation may enter, the nation that keeps faith. Yeah. Don't trust the nations. They're all under judgment. Some of them are going to turn to your God. Trust Yahweh, for heaven's sake. He's the judge of the nations. He's the one who's calling the shots. He's the one who has the world in his hands. He's the one who's going to destroy the city of earth and give you the city of heaven. Why would you trust them? It's Yahweh who must bring deliverance, including, and I've left this out on purpose. If you've got your Bible, look please at chapter 25, verse 6. On this mountain, that's Jerusalem, the mountain to which in chapter 2 all the nations were going to come. On this mountain, the Lord Almighty will prepare a feast of rich food for all peoples. Chapter 24, he destroyed the whole world. For all peoples, a banquet of aged wine, the best of meats, the finest of wines. And now get this one. On this mountain, he will destroy the shroud that enfolds all peoples, the sheet that covers all nations. He will swallow up death forever. Praise his name. Praise his name. He's going to defeat the last enemy. And we are alive in the last days when he's done it. He's done it. Why would you trust the nation? Here in this section, trust gets highlighted. In that day, they will say, surely this is our God. We trusted in him, and he saved us. This is Yahweh. We trusted in him. Let us rejoice and be glad in his salvation. Lessons in trust. Lessons in trust. Then verses that many of us have memorized. You keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you, because he trusts in you. Trust in Yahweh forever, because in Yahweh is an eternal rock. Now I want to point out something to you that's important in the nature of the book and will lead us into the next lecture. In chapter 25, verse 9, the word that is translated trust, we trusted in him, actually, most literally means we waited for him. This is Yahweh. We waited for him. Let us rejoice and be glad. That's the verb kavah. Come out on a Tuesday night, you ought to get some Hebrew to take home and wow your friends and neighbors with. And it's usually translated wait. But it is very commonly used as a synonym for the word batach, which literally is trust. Same thing with another Hebrew word, hakah, also base meaning wait. It's also used as a synonym with trust. Why? Because if you won't wait for him, you don't trust him. I'll say more about that in the next lecture.